Hey guys, tonight we're wandering back into the hazy glow of gaslight London, where fog hangs low in the alleyways, chimneys puff like sleepy dragons, and the streets never quite fall silent. You're tucked under a pile of woolen covers in a narrow boarding room above a bakery, where the scent of burnt crust clings to the wallpaper and every passing cart rattles your window panes. The mattress sags like it's already given up for the night, and your pillow might be stuffed with disappointment and old newspapers. You close your eyes, but sleep. Not happening. The year is 1887. You have no electricity, no blackout curtains, and certainly no white noise machine. Instead, you get the clink of hooves on cobblestone, the echo of a drunkard arguing with a lamppost, and the gentle drip 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 of a pipe that may or may not lead directly to your ceiling. And let's not even talk about the gaslights hissing from the wall. Romantic in theory, but in practice, they smell a bit like hot cabbage and offer all the cozy ambience of a flickering interrogation room. Victorian insomnia was a full sensory experience, and unlike today, you couldn't scroll your way into slumber. No podcasts, no sleepy playlist, a prayer that the chimney sweep doesn't start early. Sleep was something you hoped for, like rainfall after a long drought. And if it didn't arrive, well, that was your moral failing, wasn't it? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps a lot. And while you're settling in, feel free to post your location and local time in the comments. Love knowing where in the world we're all falling asleep together. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shift under the covers. The streets have calmed a bit. A dog barks once, twice, then goes quiet. The building creaks. You're wearing a linen nightshirt that feels like someone ironed it with gravel. Outside, a lamplighter passes his pole, tapping lightly against each iron post. It's oddly calming. Like someone's tucking the city in one lamp at a time, but you're still awake. And if you're like many Victorians, you're not alone. Insomnia was surprisingly common in the 19th century, even if they didn't always call it that. They used words like nervous agitation, hysteria, brain exhaustion, or simply bad humors. The causes? Everything from industrial noise and bad air to rich food, overthinking, or a lack of moral clarity. One journal, from 1869, even claimed the rise of railway travel was disrupting the nation's sleep, because, apparently, locomotives rattling through one's dreams was both literal and metaphorical. You fluff your pillow again. It doesn't help. Maybe it's the full moon tonight, or maybe it's the baked eel you had for supper. Who knows? Whatever it is, your body's tired but your mind is doing laps like it's trying out for the Victorian Olympics. What did they do? These sleep-hungry souls in nightcaps and shawls. Some walked the halls, quiet pacing, slippered feet brushing dusty floors. Others took to reading long sermons or scientific treatises boring enough to sedate the brain. And a few brave souls brewed up herbal remedies, chamomile, valerian, poppy, and, in a move that might surprise you, lettuce. Yes, lettuce. But we're getting ahead of ourselves tonight. You're living the experience of a restless Victorian, dim candlelight casting monstrous shadows across your wardrobe. The smell of paraffin thick in the air, and the vague hope that someone, somewhere, is boiling a kettle and whispering, you should try soaking your feet in mustard water. The house across the street, yes, that one with the crooked windows and ivy trying to strangle the bricks, has its own night owl. You can just make out a silhouette by the window. Is she reading, sewing, or just watching the gaslight flicker? Like you, historians still argue whether urban life made sleep worse or just more noticeable. Before gaslights and factories, people slept in segmented patterns. First sleep, second sleep, with a period of waking in between. They might get up, tend the fire, whisper with a spouse, or according to some sources write poetry. In the quiet dark, it wasn't strange to be awake at 2 a.m. It was expected, but by the Victorian age, uninterrupted sleep had become the gold standard, and if you didn't get it, you were doing something wrong. In this moment, you feel that pressure, Why can't you just drift off? Is it the coal smoke? The too warm socks? Or the fact that your neighbor's parrot hasn't shut up since dusk? You sigh, you look to the ceiling. A spider dangles just within your peripheral vision, gently swaying like a grotesque metronome. A lullaby, it is not. Your mind turns to remedies. Maybe tomorrow, you'll visit a pharmacist and ask for something mild. He'll probably suggest a tincture or a bath in lavender-infused salts. Or maybe one of those sleep lectures at the Mechanics Institute. The last one blamed insomnia on tight corsets and too many novels. For now though, you lie still. Let the creaks settle around you. Let the gaslight hiss like a sleepy snake. Let the tick of the clock remind you, you are not alone in this midnight vigil. After all, you're in good company. Half the city is tossing and turning with you, wondering if lettuce tea is as ridiculous as it sounds. You're still lying there, one foot poking out from under your blanket in some desperate act of temperature regulation. Maybe the bed is too warm. Or maybe it's just that your mind has decided that now is the perfect time to revisit every awkward conversation from the past 5 years. Welcome to the Sleepless Night, Victorian edition. Let's consider the many culprits that kept Victorians, just like you, staring at the ceiling. First, the food. You had a late dinner, probably somewhere around 9 p.m, that's fashionable now. But back then, it was an upper-middle-class norm. Maybe roast beef with turnips, boiled pudding, and a side of pickled eggs. Heavy, greasy, and absolutely not sleep-friendly. Your stomach is waging a quiet rebellion, bubbling like a potion in a cauldron. Sleep. Not tonight, dear Dot. Then there's the air. London nights don't smell like fresh rain or lavender fields. They smell like coal smoke, horse manure, and industrial ambition. Windows are a gambloo, either seal in the stench or let in the noise, and if you live near a factory, good luck. Those machines hum, grind, and clatter at all hours, like mechanical nightmares tapping Morse code through the walls. Shift again. The mattress squeaks in protest. It's probably filled with horsehair, a Victorian favorite, supposedly breathable, long-lasting, and itchy. The quilt itches too, though that might be the damp. Or fleas. You try not to think about it, and then, of course, there's the plumbing. Or lack thereof. If nature calls in the middle of the night, you're not padding down to a modern restroom with glowing LEDs and heated seats. No, you're clutching a candle. Tiptoeing down a cold corridor. To the privy in the backyard or, worse, using the chamber pot under the bed. You do this silently, praying the creaky floorboards don't wake the landlord's wife. Historians still argue whether it was the architecture or the etiquette that made nighttime so difficult. Victorian houses were designed with social hierarchy. In mind, high ceilings for show, drafty hallways for mystery, and paper-thin walls for dramatic tension. Some families even arranged bedrooms by moral order, so you might end up wedged between your grandmother and a spinster aunt, both of whom snore like enthusiastic trombones. Let's not forget lighting. Gas lamps were an upgrade from candles, but they were temperamental. They flickered, they hissed, and they filled the room with a slightly sulphurous haze. You'd wake up with a throat as dry as Dickens' humor, and eyes that felt like they'd been scrubbed with a chimney brush, and off those chimneys, they rattle at night. They groan. Sometimes they belch soot without warning. You've probably already lost a sock or two to the fireplace. Maybe a hopeful mouse has taken it. He's nesting, dreaming peacefully. Must be nice. Your blanket slips, and you reach to tug it back over your shoulder. The fabric is coarse, woven by someone whose job title was probably textile apprentice number 37. There are no electric blankets, here just layers of wool, possibly damp, always heavy. They pin you down like a judgmental ant with strong opinions on your sleep habits. And sleep was serious business to Victorians. Not because they thought it was healing, but because they thought not sleeping might be ... moral weakness. A lack of spiritual hygiene, if you will. One medical journal warned that too much thought after sunset could unhinge the delicate balance of the etheric brain. Whatever that means, so here you lie, a bit bloated from supper, nose tingling from the gaslight, ears full of creaks and distant hoofbeats, and just when you think you might finally drift off, the neighbor's baby starts to cry. It's a muffled wail, the kind that pierces walls like a particularly insistent ghost. You close your eyes tighter, count sheep, though honestly, given your room's smell, you suspect there's a real sheep in the hallway. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Victorians believed you could ward off insomnia by sleeping with a raw onion under your bed, or by reciting specific Bible verses in reverse, or by stroking a cat exactly 12 times counterclockwise. You haven't tried that last one, but the tabby outside looks mildly cursed. So maybe not tonight. Some went even further, believing that staring too long at your reflection before bed could invite mirror spirits to steal your dreams. You do a quick mental scan of your room, mirror, covered. Spirits, only the medicinal kind. For now, one thing is clear, the city is never fully asleep. Somewhere, someone is writing in candlelight. Someone else is trimming a wick, heating water, or feeding sourdough starter in their kitchen. Even if you can't sleep, you're not alone. You're part of the city's strange, sleepless heartbeat. Eventually, the baby stops. A dog barks twice, then curls back into whatever Victorian nest dogs made, probably a coal sack and a biscuit. A carriage rolls by slowly, its wheels whispering against the stones. You breathe in, still coal. You exhale, still pudding, but maybe, just maybe, your eyelids feel a little heavier. It's only 1:43 a.m., 8 hours left until the bakery opens below and fills your room with the yeasty thrum of hot bread. You smile. That's not so bad. Maybe you'll get a bit of sleep yet. Still wide awake, aren't you? Don't worry, tonight we're pulling out the leafy big guns. That's right, lettuce. Now, when you think of lettuce, you probably imagine sandwiches, Caesar salads. Maybe that one limp leaf they always hide under. Diner burgers. But in Victorian England, lettuce wasn't just a crunchy side, it was a sleep elixir. Sort of, probably. Maybe, you lie in bed, the gaslight now dimmed to a gentle smolder, and imagine someone boiling lettuce in a saucepan, just a few doors down. Not for soup, not for supper, but for sipping, as a tea. This wasn't some fringe folk cure either. Physicians actually prescribed lettuce water to insomniacs, romaine, butterhead, even your everyday garden, leaf boiled until limp and served lukewarm in delicate porcelain cups. It was said to soothe the nerves, calm the bile, and my personal favorite, quiet the movement of thoughts. Now that's a mood. Historians still argue whether this lettuce-based treatment was genuinely medicinal or just a glorified vegetable bath. The theory stemmed from the presence of lacticarium, a milky substance found in certain lettuces that was believed to have mild sedative properties. The Victorians dubbed it lettuce opium, which is a lot cooler than it deserves. So here's you, tossing and turning, and across the city. Someone's sipping their midnight lettuce brew, a bit bitter, a little grassy, and probably disappointing, like being hugged by a damp sock, but it was one of many natural cures people clung to, especially those too proud or too broke for laudanum. The opiate-laced catch-all, Victorian cure that could knock out an elephant and give you a very problematic habit to boot. You imagine yourself creeping into the kitchen, wrapping a shawl over your flannel nightgown, lighting a single candle. You rummage through the pantry, pushing past flour sacks and onion braids, until you find the holy grail, one slightly wilted head of lettuce. You look at it and whisper, "Do your worst." The pot clinks, the water warms. You sit at the wooden table, hunched and bleary-eyed, waiting for your potion to brew. The candle flickers, the lettuce floats. You squint and think, was this what witches were burned for? The bitter smell rises, earthy, damp, like someone soaked a newspaper in lawn clippings. Still, you strain the leaves, pour the steaming liquid into a cup, and sip. It tastes green. Not the crisp kind of green, more like soggy wallpaper, paste with a hint of garden shoe. You take another sip anyway. The truth is, this ritual, the slow prep, the quiet wait, the moment of pause might have done more to help than the lettuce itself. It gave you something to do, something to believe in, something mildly disgusting to distract you from your own brain. By now, You're lying in bed again, the lettuce tea sitting uneasily in your stomach. Maybe it's working, maybe it's not. Your neighbor, meanwhile, is trying something different, entirely soaking her feet in mustard water. Yes, really. Mustard foot baths were all the rage among the sleepless elite. The idea was to draw the heat down from your overstimulated brain and into your toes. You'd fill a basin with warm water, stir in a heaping spoon of mustard, powder possibly stolen from the kitchen, and then sit, ankles deep, waiting for the tingling sensation to begin. You imagine her, across the street, wrapped in an embroidered shawl, staring out the window while her feet slowly prickle. She sips lemon water, maybe hums, maybe curses the mustard silently for not working fast enough. These weren't just old wives' tales. They were part of the Victorian obsession with the body's mysterious nervous energies. A healthy person was calm, orderly, and regulated. An insomniac, well, they were considered slightly unhinged, unbalanced, possibly poetic, possibly cursed. It depended on your social class and whether or not you wrote sonnets. For upper-class ladies, sleeplessness could be blamed on female agitation or womb wandering. The remedy: a cold compress to the forehead, or soft violin music, or relocating to the seaside to breathe bracing air and avoid thinking too much. Folks had less poetic treatments. If you couldn't sleep, you were probably just lazy, or immoral, or ironically working too hard. But tonight, you're not thinking about moral panic. You're thinking about lettuce. You remember reading somewhere that ancient Romans also used lettuce for sleep. That Emperor Augustus was a fan, and that Galen, the legendary physician, recommended it in large quantities before bed. In Victorian England, anything Roman was all the rage, so it was only natural that boiled lettuce would make a triumphant comeback, even if no one liked the taste. Your stomach growls, confused. You drank. What? You roll onto your side and stare at the wallpaper. It's peeling slightly at the corner, revealing a hidden layer of floral ghosts beneath. You trace the pattern with your eyes. You let your breath match the rhythm of the flickering gaslight. Another fun tidbit: some people swore that simply sniffing warm milk could help. You sleep, not drinking, just sniffing. You're not sure if that's charming or deeply disturbing, but you file it under maybe try tomorrow. And so the minutes slip by. You lie there, half dreaming, eyes fluttering closed and open again. Somewhere, a cat screeches. Farther off, a church bell tolls 2 o'clock. A soft fog settles in the alleyway, muffling the world like a blanket. Begin to feel ... floaty. Not quite awake, not quite dreaming. Was it the lettuce, or the act of hoping for sleep that finally soothed you? Hard to say. Historians still debate how much of Victorian medicine actually worked or whether half the effect was simply giving people something to believe in. A ritual, a routine, a hope. Tonight, that hope was green and steeped for 6 minutes, and who knows, maybe that's enough. A soft knock echoes through the alley, or maybe it's just the wind rattling the shutters again. Either way, you're still half awake. Your mind drifts to another popular Victorian sleep solution, one that doesn't involve leaves or feet. In Mustard. Tonight, let's ease into the steamy world of the Victorian bathtub. Now, don't get too excited. This isn't your modern bathroom sanctuary with scented candles and bath bombs labeled things like lavender moon escape. No, your tub is a freestanding Castrian basin that's seen things. It lives in the kitchen, because that's where the fire is, and hauling water for it is a full-body workout requiring 4 trips and at least 1 questionable bucket. But you're determined. It's 2:11 a.m., you're still awake, and the lettuce didn't do its job. So, out of bed you go, candle in hand, slippers shuffling against the wood floor. You approach the great metal beast of hope, the bathtub. Historians still argue whether nightly bathing was common, or only reserved for illness and scandal. Sleep seekers didn't care. A hot bath was touted in health manuals as a powerful nerve tonic provided the water was just the right temperature. Not too hot, not too cold. Lukewarm, like regret. You begin your preparations. First, fire. You the stove to life, feeding it kindling like a slow, glowing dragon. Then come the bucket-sculled water from the outdoor pump, hoisted and hauled, sloshing with every step. By the third bucket, you're sweating. By the fifth, you're reconsidering whether insomnia is really that bad. Finally, you pour in the last steaming kettle. The tub hisses as metal meets water. You dip in a toe, victory. Stepping in is awkward. There's no graceful way to bathe with dignity when the tub is 6 inches shorter than you. But eventually, you sink down, the water hugs your limbs with heavy warmth. And for a moment, just a moment, it feels like floating. A bath at this hour isn't just a remedy, it's a rebellion. Society says sleep is discipline, and you're out here steeping like a tea bag in defiance. The world slows. The fog on the window thickens. The ticking clock grows fainter. You let your head fall back. The flickering candlelight casts wobbly halos on the cracked plaster ceiling. Shadows dance like lazy ghosts. Now, here's a quirky twist. Some Victorians believed that the bath itself wasn't enough. You had to infuse the water. Not with Epsom salts or rose petals, but with oatmeal. Yes, oatmeal, not for scrubbing, for soaking. It was said to ease the skin and settle the soul. So, in your mind, picture yourself sprinkling oats into your already murky bath like a Victorian breakfast witch. The result, a faintly porridgey smell, a bit of sediment clinging to your elbow, and the mild horror of realizing you are now technically soup. Still, it helps. Or seems to. The warmth pulls the tension from your shoulders. The damp curls your hair into dreamy shapes. You close your eyes. Some manuals advise singing softly while soaking. A lullaby, a hymn. Anything to lull the mind. You hum half a bar of something. Maybe Greensleeves or a melody you made up on the spot. Your voice warbles in the steam. Unsteady but oddly comforting. You imagine a doctor's note. Patient presents with sleeplessness. Recommended treatment. 1 oat bath. Song accompaniment. Dimly lit room. Meanwhile, down the street, someone else is trying the cold method. Cold baths were all the rage with the more Spartan thinkers of the Dathos who believed that shock, not comfort, cured the nerves. These were the same people who thought jogging in full wool attire was invigorating. The kind of folks who sneered at lettuce tea. You picture one such soul, possibly named Reginald, plunging himself into an icy tub at dawn. His mustache freezes mid-scream. He emerges claiming total clarity. We'll stick with the oats. Thanks. Back in your bath, the water cools. You sigh, your fingers wrinkle. Your thoughts grow syrupy, like they're moving through molasses. It's not quite sleep, but it's close. It's the layer just before dreaming. You make no move to get out. Let the water hold you a little longer. Let the echoes fade. Another fun detail. Some Victorian women were advised to sleep after bathing with a ribbon tied loosely around their wrist. Supposedly, it reminded them not to overthink, or maybe it was a way to tell your body, you're safe. It's bedtime. You think about tying a ribbon. You think about drying off. You think about the effort of climbing back into bed. And all of it feels distant, floaty. There's a soft knock again, probably a shutter, or the wind, or the city whispering goodnight. You sigh and finally stand. The water rushes off your skin, heavy and sleepy. You wrap yourself in a towel and pad back to bed. The sheets are cold again, but not cruelly so. The pillow finds your cheek. And now, the softness takes root. Maybe it was the bath. Maybe it was the oats. Or maybe it was the feeling that you had done something to fight back against the night. That you took the darkness and steeped it in steam. Whatever it was, your breath is slower now. You're asleep. Or almost. Or caught in that delicious in-between state where the world feels muffled and everything smells faintly of soap and old books. But before you go under completely, let's take a quiet step deeper into the velvet-laced labyrinth of Victorian bedtime routines, this time through the feather-filled battleground that was your mattress. Now, you probably think a bed is just a bed. Some springs, some fluff, maybe a creaky headboard. But in 19th century Britain, your mattress was a matter of philosophy. Did you choose horsehair, straw, feathers, or the controversial new innovation, wire springs you shuffle under your heavy Coverlet, the kind quilted by hand and passed down through 3 grandmothers. And try not to think too hard about what's inside your mattress. Let's start with feathers. A goose feather mattress was the envy of any upper middle class sleeper. Soft, luxurious, and absolutely determined to poke you in the ribs by midnight. It was like sleeping on a warm, slightly aggressive loaf of bread. Fluffing it before bed was a full upper body workout. Maids were instructed to beat and shake them into cloud form every morning, although some simply gave them a half-hearted puff and hoped no one noticed. But if you weren't flush with goose down, you might have to settle for straw. Yes, actual, dry rustling straw, crammed into ticking fabric and sewn shut. Every time you rolled over, it sounded like sleeping in a hayloft during a windstorm. You'd dream of cows and wake up itchy. Then came horsehair. Tougher, smellier, but beloved by those who believed in firm support. Horsehair mattresses were the orthopedic choice of the age, often paired with warnings not to overindulge in softness, lest your spine forget its duty. Historians still argue whether the Victorian obsession with moral posture bled into their mattress choices. Judging by the iron bedsteads and lumpy pillows, I'd wager yes. Now, here's the truly charming bit. Some beds were stuffed with rags. Bits of old clothing, fabric scraps, whatever was handy. They called them rag beds, and if you were very lucky, the person who stuffed your mattress left a surprise insider button. A coin, a forgotten pin that you discovered the hard way. As you lie there, shifting under your weighty wool blanket, you can almost hear the echo of centuries of sleepless fidgeting, people swearing softly into the dark, adjusting their straw bunches, wondering whether goose feathers were worth the extra shilling. Victorian pillows were no better. Some were filled with bran, others with hops, yes hops, the thing used to brew beer. Supposedly, the aroma of dried hops calmed the nervous system. You imagine resting your head on a barley-scented pouch, trying not to sneeze yourself into a sinus infection. And then there's the bolster pillow, a long, firm log of a thing, meant to keep your spine in alignment and your moral compass upright. You were supposed to tuck it under your knees or drape your arms across it like some melancholy romantic hero. Whether it worked or not, no one knows, but it looked serious, and that mattered. Your sheets. Crisp linen, if you could afford it. Coarse homespun if you couldn't. Washed infrequently, because laundry meant boiling vats and calloused knuckles. If you're lucky, yours smell faintly of lavender. If not, maybe just slightly. Human, you shift again. The straw pokes. The bolster rolls. You consider swapping your pillow for the hop one you saw in the guest room. Too far, too much effort. Now here comes the really niche stuff. Victorian bed canopies weren't just for aesthetic. Some were laced with herbs. Seriously, sage, rosemary, even chamomile were sometimes hung above the bed to calm the air. You can imagine a half-sleepy soul lying beneath a curtain of dangling thyme, blinking slowly and wondering if they were about to roast. Even bed frames were part of the equation. Wrought iron was thought to be cleaner than woodless, prone to lice and mysterious dampness, but it creaked. Oh, it creaked. You had to master the art of turning over silently, which, frankly, should have been taught in schools. And in winter, you'd stuff hot bricks into the foot of the bed. Not glowing red ones, of course, just warm stones wrapped in flannel, tucked near your frozen toes. Sometimes they'd stay warm till dawn. Sometimes they cracked, or leaked, or just made your bed feel like an accident waiting to happen. You begin to notice how heavy everything feels. The covers, the silence, the past itself. Another odd little tip from 1860s. Sleep guides. Place a Bible under your pillow to still the devil's whisper. Not for reading, just as a holy weight. You don't know whether to laugh or try it. A pocket-sized New Testament probably doubles nicely as a sleep aid and a moral compass. The Victorian version of melatonin. And here's the fringe fact of the evening. A few eccentric physicians recommended sleeping with your bed facing exactly north. Something about aligning with the Earth's magnetic field. Apparently, it harmonized the body and promoted better dreams. Historians are still debating whether this was early geomancy or just directional feng shui in Leicester. So now, Lying there under your slightly lumpy quilt, possibly stuffed with half a waistcoat and one lost spoon, you adjust your hips, rest your head on a pillow filled with barley and hope, and face whichever way feels least creaky. You close your eyes. You listen to the world around you, the soft drip of rain, maybe, or the rustle of an old bedframe adjusting to your weight. A fox cries far off. The church bell is silent. And under your herbs canopy, you begin to slip downward. Deeper. The mattress sighs beneath you, as if finally ready to let you go. Your eyes are closed, but your mind is still tracing slow, quiet loops. You're warm, tucked into a rag-stuffed mattress that Mitor might not be poking you in the ribs with a forgotten safety pin. But something's still off. You turn your head on the hops-filled pillow and realize it's too quiet. That's right, the deadly silence. In the Victorian world, nighttime was never truly quiet, and for good reason. People didn't fall asleep to stillness. They fell asleep to sounds, intentional ones, if you were fancy. Unintentional ones, if you are not. Let's drift now into the odd world of Victorian sleep sounds. You start with the basic, ticking clocks, the slow, rhythmic tick of a brass-cased pocket watch hanging by the bedside. It isn't the aggressive tick-tick of modern clocks, it's gentler, more wooden, like a heartbeat recorded through a feather pillow. Some folks even owned wind-up sleep clocks that didn't chime, just ticked, like a metronome for dreams. Then, there's the fire. A low crackle from the hearth that never quite dies, thanks to a smouldering log or two kept banked under ash. The sound is soothing, like parchment, crinkling gently in the wind. Every now and then, it pops. And in that pop, you're reminded that you're not alone. The house is breathing with you. But here's where things get weird. Some people used noisemakers, not the party kind, devices, machines. In the 1880s, there were sleep bells, yes. Bells tuned to emit soft, irregular tings throughout the night. The idea was that the unpredictability helped distract anxious minds. Historians still argue whether they worked or just annoyed everyone else in the house. You imagine one now. A brass bell suspended in your room, wired to some intricate, hand-cranked contraption. Every few minutes, ting like a ghost, remembering to text you. Now, if you were of a more musical temperament, you might opt for a music box. These delicate things played about 30 seconds of tune, usually a lullaby, waltz, or hymn. Then silence, until you wound it again. Some folks fell asleep with the key still in hand, rewinding every time their dreams broke. You're hearing it now. The metallic plink of a half-remembered tune, slowed slightly from over-whining, a lullaby with a limp, but for the rustic folk hand. By rustic, I mean everyone living outside a two-block radius of urban gaslights. The soundscape of the night was ... wilder. You'd have owls, distant dog barks, a pig maybe, wind whistling through badly sealed windows, floorboards stretching like arthritic knees, mice in the walls, the occasional thud of something that may have been a book falling, or may have been your old cupboard, resigning from its duties. Yet in the strangest twist of all, some people added noises on purpose. One popular trick, letting a small trickle of water flow from a ceramic jug into a bowl, creating a gentle drip, drip, drip. It was said to imitate a babbling brook, calming to those who couldn't sleep. That is, if it didn't make them need to pee. Even Ada, a few eccentric households rigged what could best be described as proto-rain machines. Water poured over pebbles near open windows, mimicking rainfall. You picture a half-mad baronet tinkering with teacups and roof gutters to achieve that perfect light drizzle on cobblestone ambience. And let's not forget the auditory star of the Victorian bedroom, the wind. Whether it was rattling glass panes or whining through eaves, the wind was your constant lullaby, often named in sleep journals with phrases like the night's fingers pressing gently at the shutters. Or less poetically, that blasted draft again. Now, if you were really fancy, you might own a velvet curtained bed with built-in sound insulation. These were known as four-posters with tester tops. Curtains would be drawn all around, muffling the outside world into a cozy hush. In theory, In practice, you probably just heard yourself breathing louder. Some spiritualists of the time claimed these enclosed beds trapped dreams, allowing them to swirl and settle around you like tea leaves. You imagine that no lying inside a bed that collects dreams like cobwebs. Every breath stirring some ancient wisp of memory. And if sound wasn't enough, you had scent. Yes, we're talking Victorian aromatherapy. Linen drawers were lined with dried lavender sachets. Bedrooms might feature a bowl of rosewater or a few drops of clove oil rubbed into the wood beams. The idea was simple: create a multi-sensory lull. Sound, scent, warmth. Just ignore the bedbugs. There's one more fringe detail that's too odd not to include. Certain families kept small birds in cages near the bed, not for companionship, for ambient chirping. Supposedly, the gentle rustle and occasional cheep of a sleepy canary soothed restless minds. Of course, the success of this tactic probably depended on whether your bird was a soprano or a shrieker. You roll over now, half asleep, and listen to your room. There's the soft groan of old furniture, a windblown clack from the loose shutter. Maybe you imagine the sound of water trickling into a ceramic bowl across the room, a music box winding down, a faint scent of lavender clinging to the sheet, and beneath it, all silence that isn't empty. It's layered, textured, like a faded song with most of the instruments missing, that it holds you or keeps you here, still, warm, barely awake. Now that you've sunk into the mattress and the soundtrack of the Victorian night is gently humming in the background, wind through the shutters. The delicate creak of wood expanding in the chill. It's time we paid a visit to another strange feature of the era's approach to sleep, the bedtime beverage. Because let's face it, tea wasn't just a morning affair. No, in the 19th century, what you drank before bed could determine whether you slumbered like a saint or tossed like a cursed mariner mid-storm. So you swing your slippered feet out of bed, shuffle down the creaky hallway to your little kitchen, and reach for a cup. It's stoneware, hand-glazed, just the right weight. You place it beside the hearth and begin your nightly ritual. Let's begin with the superstar of Victorian nightcaps. Lettuce water. Yes, you heard that right. Steeped lettuce leaves. Warm, not boiling water, and a touch of honey if you had it. The Victorians swore by it. Lacticarium, they called it, found in the white sap of certain lettuce varieties, was believed to calm the nervous system and induce light drowsiness. You might call it the salad's secret weapon, or a warm Caesar that lost its ambition. Historians still argue whether the sedative effects were real or placebo. But either way, drinking something green and vaguely bitter before bed gave you the comforting sense that you were doing something for your health. Even if you burped gently like a cow afterward, if lettuce wasn't your leafy drug of choice, there were other concoctions. Poppy tea, for example. Derived from poppy seeds, not quite opium, but opium adjacent. This one had actual calming properties, but also a risk of mild hallucinations and waking up thinking you were Queen Victoria's lost cousin. Eventually, it was banned or regulated, but for a while, it was the go-to for people who wanted dreams to last. Forever. More commonly, the Victorian middle class turned to hot milk, sometimes plain, sometimes with nutmeg, clove, or a whisper of cinnamon. One sleep manual from 1852 suggested stirring the milk precisely 16 times clockwise to align the vapors. A little eccentric, sure, but stirring with purpose is half the battle of any self-care routine. And then there was gruel. Yes, gruel, that infamous Dickensian sludge. Warm, thin porridge made from oats or barley. While usually associated with orphans and workhouses, a surprisingly large number of middle-class Victorians used it as a light, soporific supper. Easy to digest, easy to forget. And, with enough honey, almost pleasant, you spoon some now warm, bland, vaguely oatish, not bad, not great, but undeniably sleepy. Of course, if you were a bit posher, you might prepare Negosa diluted wine punch, usually port or sherry thinned with hot water, lemon, nutmeg, and sugar. Served warm, in delicate porcelain cups. It was like a bedtime hug from your wealthier aunt who always wore too much perfume. One glass, and your cheeks flushed with comfort. 2 glasses, and you might forget which bedchamber was yours. For the more medicinally inclined, there were elixirs, patent medicines boasting all sorts of mysterious, vaguely narcotic properties. Dr. Hope's restful drops, soothing syrup, gentleman's dreaming cordial. These often contained small amounts of laudanum, alcohol, or worse, but they came in very elegant bottles. You sip, sigh, and try not to read the side effects. There's a lesser-known drink worth mentioning too. Barley water with orange flower. A favorite among the nervous. This concoction was prized for its clarity and grace. Just enough flavor to distract the racing mind, just enough ritual to tell your body, we are done for the day. You drink slowly now. The warmth creeps down your throat like soft velvet. Your limbs begin to hum with heaviness. But there's one peculiar historical tidbit you didn't see coming. Some Victorians drank warm vinegar. Mixed with honey, they believed it purified the blood and encouraged melancholic balance. You take a moment to imagine it warm apple cider vinegar slipping down the throat, making you wince just before bed. Sleep didn't come easily for those folks. But at least they went to bed feeling righteous. And here's a lovely fringe. Practice, placing a cup of cooled herbal infusion on the windowsill not to drink, but to let the moon look in. It was believed that moonlight enhanced the drink's calming essence. Whether or not this worked is anyone's guess. But there's something undeniably sweet about preparing tea for both you and the cosmos. Tonight, maybe you choose the milk. Maybe you try the lettuce water. Maybe you simply sip warm water from a chipped ceramic mug. The way your great-grandmother might have done after putting out the last candle. The sounds of the night continue, muffled clinks, far-off foxes, the distant wind combing the trees. You place your empty cup on the bedside stool, worn smooth by years of sleepy hands doing the same thing. One hand tugs the blanket higher. The other rests on your chest, rising and falling like a tiny ship in a gentle tide. Your body is heavier now, not with exhaustion, but with ease. Your cup is empty. Your breathing has slowed. The fire is a low sigh, and the blanket has molded itself around your shoulders like a loyal cat that decided tonight it will guard your dreams. But let's not get too cozy just yet, because we haven't discussed what you're wearing to bed. You open your eyes slightly, just enough to glance down, and yes, you're dressed appropriately for a respectable Victorian bedtime. Or are you? Tonight, we're slipping into the surprisingly dramatic world of Victorian sleepwear, a place where social status, superstition, practicality, and the occasional feathered bonnet all come together in a sleepy fashion parade. So, let's start with the basics. The nightshirt. If you're a man in the mid-1800s, your sleepwear is basically a long, loose shirt, something between a tunic and a smock. Often made of flannel or linen, these nightshirts reached the knees or calves, depending on the modesty of your household. They had buttons down the chest, and maybe a pocket, in case you wanted to store dreams. Some were plain. Others were embroidered at the collar. Because even unconscious men must not be mistaken for peasants. If you're a woman, things get more complicated and more voluminous. You're wearing a nightgown, which is part dress, part parachute. Layers of cotton or cambric with lace collars, puffed sleeves, sometimes even ruffles. There were ribbons, bows, even matching sleep caps. Because obviously, when you're unconscious, you must still be presentable in the colder months. Nightgowns were swapped for nightdresses with underslips, yes, layering even in bed. Just in case you needed to wake up and walk into a drawing room with dignity. Historians still debate whether this sleepwear was more about warmth or maintaining strict gender boundaries. Even while snoring, you shuffle now toward a chipped mirror and spot yourself. Candle in hand, long sleeves dangling. A cap tied beneath your chin like a sleepy pioneer. You look ridiculous. But also, strangely elegant now. About those sleep caps, both men and women wore them. Men's were long and cone-shaped, sometimes with a tassel. Women's were frillier, sometimes tied under the chin like baby bonnets. Originally, they were meant to keep the head warm and protect hairstyles from bed linen friction. But, naturally, Victorians infused them with a bit of superstition too. Some believed sleep caps protected the crown chakra or kept dreams from escaping the skull during the vulnerable hours of night. Is that scientifically sound? No. Is it wonderfully spooky? Absolutely. You imagine adjusting your sleep cap just before drifting off, whispering, "Stay in, dreams. Don't fly away." And then, of course, you had socks. Not everyone wore them, but those who did believed it prevented night chills that could lead to pneumonia, gout, or a general sense of doom. These were often hand-knitted wool socks, itchy, but better than frostbitten toes. You wiggle yours now. One of them has a hole. Typical. For wealthier sleepers, bed jackets were a trend. Short, quilted garments worn over nightgowns while reading or praying in bed. They were rarely buttoned, just draped over the shoulders like sleepy superhero capes. You can almost hear the rustle of a silk bed jacket as someone reaches for their candle snuffer and closes. The Book of Psalms with dramatic flair. But even the humble nightshirt had its controversies. Did you know there was public debate in the late 1800s about whether striped nightshirts encouraged moral laxity? Yes, truly. Solid white symbolized purity. Stripes, too exciting, too modern, possibly French. And just when you thought it couldn't get more peculiar, there were dream drawers. A sort of bloomer-like garment with lace trim, worn under the nightgown to prevent cold womb. Medical manuals recommended them for women of delicate nervous constitutions. You lift the blanket now and pretend you're wearing a pair, just to feel historically accurate. Meanwhile, children were often bundled in sleeping sacks, or tucked so tightly into bed that escape was impossible. This was called swaddling older children, and it was thought to calm their erratic humors. Whether it calmed their tempers or just flattened their personalities is still up for debate. And we haven't even touched on dressing gowns, which weren't sleepwear technically, but were part of the winding down ritual. These were luxurious, robe-like garments worn over one's nightclothes. During the transitional moments between "I'm still sort of awake" and "I've entered the void," if you're lucky, tonight, maybe you're wearing a velvet robe with tasseled cord, dragging slightly on the floor as you walk to your window, stare at the moon, and whisper goodnight to your goose feather pillow. But let's not forget, what you wore to bed wasn't always just about comfort. It was also about self-image. Many Victorians kept up appearances even in private. Married couples might have coordinated nightwear, fancy initials stitched into the collars. Some people even had morning nightwear for sleeping after a loved one's death, complete with black trim. Yes, morning. In your pajamas. But for all the quirks and ribbons, the heart of it was simple. You dressed for sleep because sleep was serious business. It was a fragile state, a sacred one. And every layer, the cap, the gown, the socks, was a tiny protection against the chaos of dreams, the chill of mortality, or just the possibility that the maid might walk in too early. Now, as your mind drifts, you imagine loosening the last ribbon beneath your chin, slipping under the quilt, the lace at your collar now flattened gently against your chest. You are swaddled like a tired cloud. Sleep doesn't just find you, you're already dressed for it. The quilt rises and falls with your breath now, a slow tide against your chest. You're warm, properly attired in ruffles and wool, and gently drifting. But don't close your eyes just yet. We haven't talked about what you're sleeping on, because tonight, we're sinking into the peculiar, often prickly, world of Victorian beds and bedding, a saga of feathers, horsehair, creaking iron frames, and more than a few lumps in the wrong places. Let's start with the basics. You're in a 4-poster bed, of course. Probably mahogany, possibly oak. Towering posts on each corner, maybe with a canopy of embroidered fabric overhead. Partly practical. That heavy curtain you just drew aside, it's there to block drafts, absorb noise, and keep the nighttime chill and snooping servants at bay. This is your cocoon now. Welcome. Victorian bed frames came in many styles, but iron was increasingly popular, especially after people started to worry about bedbugs and other unseeable infestations. Wooden beds had crevices. Iron beds, easier to clean, and just cold enough to make you question every life choice when you sat down without socks. Your mattress, That's a straw tick if your lower income sack filled with straw or chaff. That rustled every time you moved and flattened into a human-shaped pancake after 3 nights. If you're middle class though, congratulations, you're sleeping on horsehair. Hand-stitched into layered cotton ticking. Not soft, exactly, but firm, honest, it says. You've earned this backache, and the wealthy. They're floating on goose-down mattresses, stacked sometimes 2 or even 3 deep. A plush, cloud-like experience, unless you're allergic. 2 feathers, in which case you sneeze your way through your dreams, of course. We can't skip the feather beater, sort of mattress topper filled with feathers or down. You flop onto it and instantly disappear about 6 inches. You are consumed by your bed. This was the Victorian answer to memory foam, minus the fancy science. If it didn't cradle your bones like an overenthusiastic grandmother, it wasn't. Stuffed enough. Now let's talk pillows. 1, maybe 2, likely 3. You must be aristocracy. Pillows varied in fill and firmness. Feather was standard, but some were stuffed with kapok, wool, or even shredded rags. For proper neck support, a Victorian might sleep with a bolster pillow, which looked like a long loaf of bread wrapped in linen. Very good for spinal alignment. Very bad for cuddling. And the sheets. Linen, if you're lucky. Cotton, if you're practical. Flannel, in the colder months. Many households used undersheets, a protective layer between mattress and body, and top sheets, counterpanes and bedspreads, all tucked in with military precision. Seriously, you could bounce a coin off the corners. You could trap a sibling. Now, you may be wondering, what about blankets? Oh, there were layers. The classic woolen blanket was heavy, slightly scratchy, and tucked under your chin like a promise. On colder nights, out came the eiderdown's plump, patterned quilts filled with down stitched in diamonds or florals. Some weighed as much as a medium-sized dog. You didn't just sleep under them. You were pinned in place, and yes, for the particularly elite, there were silk coverlets sottily useless for warmth, but visually stunning. Historians still argue whether these were ever actually used, or just draped across beds for company. Visits U-turn now, the sheets rustling faintly, and we must mention the warming Panametal dish filled with hot coals or heated stones, swished between the sheets before bed to take the chill off, operated by servants, or, if you were unlucky, your grumbling older brother. But beware, leave it in one place too long, and you risk scorching the linen, or giving yourself a very confusing burn in the shape of a brass flower. Or, if you're fancier still, you might have used a ceramic hot water bottle round, white, tucked near your feet under the blankets. They worked reasonably well, unless they cracked, in which case your night turned instantly into a very soggy tragedy. We can't forget the bed's less romantic side: vermin, fleas, mice, lice. It's one reason some Victorians shook out their mattresses and beat their pillows each morning. Others sprinkled their bedding with lavender or rose petals, not just for fragrance, but to deter the creepier guests. And yes, beds were often shared, not always romantically. Siblings bunked together. Traveling strangers sometimes slept head to toe in public inns. In rural households, warming the bed might involve a grandmother taking your spot an hour before bedtime, just to make it livable. There were even reports of beds being rented by the hour in London, not for the scandalous reasons you might think, but for daytime naps by labourers or between carriage stops. Truly, a Victorian Airbnb of sorts. So here you are, finally settled. Mattress beneath you, quilt above your cap, slightly askew. The iron bedframe creaks as you shift. The candle flickers on the nightstand. And you think this might be the most comfortable you've been all week. Your foot brushes something warm. It's the bedcat, of course. Useless at catching mice, but excellent at keeping your toes from freezing. As you listen to her purr, you close your eyes once more, and let the fabric of the 1800s lull you, not just the soft cotton beneath your fingers, but the entire layered, creaky, slightly itchy world of a Victorian bed. You're sinking deeper now, not just into the mattress, but into that delicious fog of almost sleep, where time slows and even the sound of your own breath feels antique. But before you slip away completely, We should talk about what's in the air because no Victorian bedroom was complete without its own collection of smells, sounds, and nighttime rituals. You inhale, it smells faintly of beeswax, coal smoke, lavender, and maybe just a trace of whatever your neighbor had for dinner 4 hours ago. That's Victorian ventilation for you. Let's start with the air itself. Most Victorian homes didn't have central heating. Instead, bedrooms were warmed if at all by small coal-burning fireplaces or Castian stoves. These fireplaces provided gentle warmth, dancing shadows, and the constant threat of ash in your nightcap. Some nights, the fire's barely more than embers, and you can feel the coolness creep in around the edges of the quilt. Other times, it's roaring too high, making your cheeks flush while your toes remain stubbornly frozen. Ventilation was a complicated business. On one hand, Victorians feared bad air believed to carry disease. On the other, they were terrified of drafts, which were blamed for everything from stiff necks to full-blown pneumonia. Historians still argue whether they were more afraid of open windows or closed ones, so the solution: tiny grates near the ceiling, a cracked window, hidden behind heavy drapes, maybe a folded towel along the sill, just in case a rogue breeze tried to assassinate you. And then there were the bedroom scents, some natural, some less so. If you're lucky, your sheets were washed recently in lavender water, or blued with indigo to look extra white. Lavender and rose petals were commonly sprinkled between sheets or tucked in sachets. People believed these scents soothed the nerves and promoted gentle dreams. You inhale, again maybe you smell them too, tucked near the pillowcase like a sleepy secret. But bedrooms didn't always smell like heaven. You had chamber pots, after all. Hidden under the bed, sometimes with floral lids, emptied ideally in the morning, though not always. And if your household relied on gaslighting, there might be a faint whiff of sulfur in the air. It's fine, you'll get used to it. Eventually, let's not forget the creaks and groans. Your bedframe is iron, it talks back, every toss and turn is a mini conversation. Then there's the floorboard that shrieks like a violin when someone walks past your door, the wind howling through a poorly sealed window, the gentle tick-tick-tick of a grandfather clock in the hallway, and, of course, the muffled sounds of the Hauserkopf from the room next door, the scurry of mice between walls, someone turning over a basin of washwater. These were the lullabies of the era. You listen closely and imagine a canary in a cage, softly rustling on its perch. Not just the pet Victorians believed birds promoted good dreams. Unless it died in the night, then, according to folklore, it was a sign of doom. You stare wide-eyed at your imaginary cage for a moment, then relax when the bird starts preening its wing. Now, as the lights fade, let's consider the bedtime rituals themselves. A typical routine began with washing up. That meant standing at a washstand or wooden table with a ceramic pitcher and bowl, splashing cold water on your face and dabbing your underarms with rosewater or alum powder. If it's winter, the water's basically ice. You try not to scream. You dry your face with a scratchy linen towel, possibly monogrammed. You brush your teeth with charcoal powder and a bristle brush made from boar hair. It tastes like ash and regret. You spit into the bowl and hope no one knocks it over before morning. If you're high society, maybe you take a few sips of sleeping draught, a mild tonic containing lettuce water, camphor, or even diluted opium, but not too much. You remember what happened to poor cousin Henrietta. Drifted off and woke up 2 days later in a completely different house. Children were often told bedtime stories or sung to hymns or lullabies like Golden Slumbers or Rockabye Baby, which, let's be honest, is deeply disturbing. If you listen to the lyrics, you might say a short prayer, kneeling on a sheepskin rug at the foot of your bed. Something like, "Now I lay me down to sleep." The rhyme comforts you, even if the part about dying in your sleep raises an eyebrow. If you're fancy, you may dab a little lavender oil on your temples, or clove water behind your ears. Gentlemen might apply a final touch of pomade to their moustaches, so they look distinguished even in dreams. One final glance at your slippered feet in the fading firelight. Then, off they come, one soft thud after another. You fold your dressing gown, tuck your prayer book under the pillow, and reach to snuff the candle with a small bell-shaped cap. And just as the room dissolves into darkness, you hear it, the deep, groaning yawn of the house itself, settling its wooden bones. You are not alone. You are never alone in a Victorian home. You pull the quilt up to your chin. Outside, the wind howls. Inside, you are a small creature, wrapped in ritual, cradled in sense. Tucked into the shadows of habit, this is how they prepared for sleep, not by chasing it, but by welcoming it. Now, close your eyes, the candle's out. The air is thick with the memories of rosewater, fire, smoke, and feather dust. Sleep is walking toward you, gentle and inevitable. The smell of rosewater and coal fades into the background as you settle deeper into the Victorian night. But your journey through their sleep rituals isn't quite finished yet. Now, you find yourself exploring the curious realm of bedroom furnishings and their secret sleep-inducing powers. You're no longer just lying on a mattress. You're reclining on a carefully engineered ecosystem designed to cradle you into oblivion. Victorian beds were often massive affairs, with heavy wooden frames, thick feather mattresses, and layers of blankets that might double as a form of therapy, or at least heavy resistance training. Let's start with the mattress. Remember that time when feather mattresses were the height of comfort, but also a potential nest for bedbugs and dust mites. Yes, Victorians often shared their beds with these unwelcome guests. And some believed that their occasional bites might even encourage a deep, dreamless sleep. Historians still argue whether this theory had any real basis or was just another excuse for itchy nights. These featherbeds were regularly floofed by servants or household members using wooden bedstick-long poles designed to beat the mattress and smooth out lumps and bumps. Imagine a morning routine involving a full workout with a wooden pole. No wonder Victorians were so particular about posture and health. Speaking of posture, beds weren't just about comfort, but also health. Maintenance. Many believed that sleeping propped up could help with digestion, circulation, or even keeping the humors balanced. You might find pillows stacked as high as a small city wall, propping you into a semi-reclined position. Some Victorian doctors even prescribed sleeping, sitting up, as a cure for conditions ranging from indigestion to tuberculosis. Now, about the bed, linen sheets were typically linen or cotton, starched to a crispness that could almost slice the skin. You run your fingers over the imagined fabric. The cool stiffness is oddly soothing, like the crunch of fresh snow underfoot. Linen sheets were believed to be more hygienic because they dried quickly and repelled pests better than wool. Over the sheets were layered blankets and quilts, often handmade with intricate patterns. In some households, these blankets were kept exclusively for nighttime, with daytime covers being lighter and more decorative. Some of these quilts even incorporated herbs sewn between layers, such as chamomile or mugwort, plants thought to ease restless minds and encourage pleasant dreams. The idea of sleeping with a pocket full of herbs to lull you to sleep is so quaint it almost makes you want to try it. You might have noticed the bed curtains, too. These weren't just for privacy or warmth. They were a whole mood setter. Thick, heavy drapes of velvet or brocade hung around the bed frame, creating a cocoon of darkness and calm. They muffled sound and blocked stray moonlight or Imagine cocooning yourself in a velvet hug. The outside world dimmed and distant. The act of drawing these curtains closed became a comforting ritual and invitation to leave the worries of the day behind and enter a world made just for rest. But furniture didn't stop at the bed. Victorians often had a small night table or washstand near the bed, holding essentials, a candle snuffer, a glass of water or brandy, if you preferred, your chamber pot lid. Maybe a well-thumbed book of poetry or prayers. Some houses even had portable warming pans. Metal pans filled with hot coals were slid between the sheets to chase away winter's chill before bedtime. You could almost feel the warmth seeping through the quilts as you imagine slipping into a pre-warmed bed luxury. Even by today's standards, there's also the intriguing case of the bed warmers. Spoon, a small metal ladle filled with hot water and wrapped in fabric. A portable heat source for cold feet. Because, as you know, Frostbitten toes are a serious sleep deterrent. Now, if you think that's all, you'd be wrong. The Victorians were nothing if not inventive. Some wealthy homes installed sleeping chairs designed to support napping upright during the day, because proper sleep was often reserved for the nighttime. These chairs had reclining backs and footrests, and sometimes small side tables for your tea or reading glasses. A nod to a lifestyle where naps were a delicate science rather than an everyday luxury. One of the quirkiest furniture-related customs was the bedroom screen. These folding screens weren't just decorative, they created private spaces within bedrooms handy when you shared rooms or had servants entering for nighttime duties. Imagine them as the Victorian equivalent of a do not disturb sign. As you relax against your imaginary stack of feather pillows, you might also feel the weight of the blankets, heavy but oddly comforting. Some believed that the pressure calmed the nerves and mimicked the sensation of a reassuring hug, much like modern weighted blankets. Sleep researchers today might nod approvingly, while Victorian doctors would argue over whether it was good for circulation. Historians still debate how much of these beliefs were medically sound, and how much were social rituals wrapped in layers of fabric. In the quiet stillness of your bed, surrounded by feathers, linens, herbs, and warmth, you begin to understand the Victorian quest for a perfect night's sleep. It was a blend of science, superstition, and sheer determination to conquer the elusive realm of dreams. And as you drift off, remember your own bed may be simpler, but tonight you share a thread with those long-ago sleepers, all wrapped in their blankets, bathed in candlelight, and chasing the same gentle embrace of sleep. You've settled into the rhythm of the Victorian night, wrapped in the layered comfort of featherbeds and perfumed linens. But the journey through Victorian insomnia cures isn't just about physical comfort, it's about the strange and wonderful remedies they turned to when sleep refused to come. Picture yourself lying awake, staring into the flickering candlelight, your mind racing. You've tried the lavender sachets and a warm bath, but the minutes crawled by like snails. What else could a Victorian do? Let's start with one of the most curious cures, the lettuce sleep potion. Yes, lettuce, not the salad bar staple you're imagining. The Victorians believed that lettuce juice contained a mild sedative effect, a belief passed down from earlier herbalists. The recipe might involve boiling lettuce leaves in water, then drinking the strained liquid before bed. Some even mixed it with milk or wine, hoping the combination would lull them into a gentle sleep. You can almost taste the slightly bitter, grassy liquidy. Imagine it as the Victorian equivalent of a sleepy herbal tea, but with a garden twist. Interestingly, modern science confirms that lettuce contains lacticarium, sometimes called lettuce opium, which does have mild sedative properties. So, maybe they were onto something after all. Next up, bathtub therapies. You probably think, baths are relaxing now, but Victorians turned them into a kind of ritual cure for insomnia. A warm bath infused with herbs like chamomile, valerian root, or hops might ease a restless mind. Some preferred cold baths, believing that a shock to the system would reset the nervous system. It's a debate that continues. Do warm or cold baths work better to induce sleep? Historians still argue. If you've ever soaked in a tub and felt your muscles relax, you're in good company. But Victorians added an extra step after the bath. You might be wrapped in heavy blankets to retain warmth, sometimes followed by a warm drink or a few drops of a tincture made from poppy or hemp. Speaking of tinctures, the Victorian medicine cabinet was a strange place, filled with bottles promising everything from restful sleep to eternal youth. Some tinctures included laudanum, a mixture of opium and alcohol, which was used cautiously. It could calm nerves but also cause dependence. Most people treated it like a last resort, though plenty relied on it quietly. You might imagine the family cat eyeing the bottle suspiciously from the bedside table. Then there was the hypnotic chair, a curious piece of furniture designed to help with sleep troubles. It was a reclined, padded chair with armrests that could gently rock you. The idea was to simulate the soothing sway of a cradle. Especially helpful for older adults who couldn't manage long stretches in bed. For those who preferred something more active, There was the advice to take a nighttime walk in the garden, often accompanied by a light snack like milk and crushed nuts or a slice of bread with honey. The fresh air, gentle exercise, and a bit of nourishment were thought to coax the body into natural restfulness. However, walking after dark was risky in some parts of Victorian cities. Mysterious shadows and dark alleys weren't ideal for a relaxing stroll. A more hands-on remedy involved the use of massage or acupressure. Though Victorian medicine was still scratching the surface of these practices, you might imagine a gentle hand pressing on your temples or wrists, aiming to ease tension and bring on a tranquil state. Some even believed that certain pressure points connected to the nervous system could release stress and promote sleep. And then there was the nightcap, which could mean different things depending on who you asked. Some Victorians enjoyed a small glass of brandy or sherry before bed, believing alcohol helped them relax. Others were cautious, knowing that while alcohol might knock you out initially, it could disrupt sleep cycles and lead to more wakefulness. Later, historians still argue over how widespread this practice really was among different classes. On the subject of nighttime drinks, milk held a special place. Warm milk was believed to soothe and calm, sometimes mixed with honey or a sprinkle of nutmeg. The comforting aroma and the creamy texture worked like a lullaby in a cup. For the truly adventurous insomniac, some physicians prescribe sleeping pills made from herbal extracts, such as valerian, hops, or passion. These herbs are still used today, with mixed results. But back then, the precise dosages were a guessing game, and effects could vary widely. You might chuckle, imagining a Victorian patient asking their doctor, "Doc, how many drops of valerian should I take before bed?" and receiving an answer along the lines of, "Try 2, or maybe 10 if you're feeling brave." And what about mental tricks? Victorians also embraced the power of suggestion and distraction. If your mind wouldn't quiet down, you might be encouraged to count backwards from 100, or imagine a calm, pastoral scene, rolling hills, a gentle stream, or a peaceful forest glade. Some even wrote or read bedtime stories or poems to themselves to focus the mind away from worries. Unlike the thrillers of today, these were gentle narratives designed to soothe, not excite. Finally, we mustn't forget the importance of routine and discipline. Victorian society prized regular schedules. Going to bed and waking up at the same time every day was considered essential for health. The idea was that your body's internal clock could be trained, much like a well-behaved servant. Sleep hygiene wasn't a trendy buzzword then, but the practice was well understood. Those who wandered late into the night risked poor health and social censure. You're almost asleep now. But before you go, remember, Victorian insomnia cures weren't just about fighting sleeplessness, they were about embracing a calm, ordered, and sensory-rich environment that invited sleep gently, like an old friend. The room is quieter now, even in your imagination. You can hear the creak of wood as the house exhales, the gentle ticking of a distant clock. You've drunk your lettuce brew, taken your herbal tincture, bathed in your chamomile water, and now, you're tucked back in, under thick quilts and lace-trimmed sheets. But sleep still doesn't come easy for everyone. That's where the more unusual Victorian sleep practices begin to whisper in from the corners of history, some practical, some slightly absurd, and some so charmingly bizarre that they could only belong to a world lit by gaslight and governed by rigid etiquette. Let's begin with positional strategies. If you've ever flipped your pillow to the cool side or rotated 90 degrees hoping your brain will finally shut up, you're not alone. Victorian guides were full of advice on which side to sleep on. The right side was recommended for digestion, while the left was thought to compress the heart. Sleeping on your back was warned against, too vulnerable, and likely to invite bad dreams. And sleeping on your stomach, entirely improper. You might as well shout into the void, "I have no control over my moral compass." Some sleep manuals even offered charts, arrows showing ideal limb positions, head angles, and what direction your bed should face east was best, apparently, because it aligned with the rising sun and God's will. Historians still debate whether anyone actually rearranged their furniture based on these guides, or simply nodded politely, and did whatever felt cozy. You're lying on your side now, just to be safe. Now, we must speak of the sleep companion, not your spouse, necessarily, but a small object, or being kept near for comfort. Some Victorians swore by holding a warm brick wrapped in flannel, especially in colder months. Others clutched a rosary, a silk handkerchief, or even a small stuffed dog. Yes, you heard that right. Stuffed animals weren't just for children. A few upper-class adults had embroidered or velvet animals, meant to serve as both bed decoration and emotional support during bouts of insomnia or grief. You reach for yours now, Litz, a slightly lumpy lamb named Mr. Snuffles. He's perfect. If the bed felt too still, some households employed sleep music. This could be a clockwork music box, a low hum of a hymn sung from another room, or even someone in the house playing the piano softly downstairs. The melody might drift upward, curling under your door like a lullaby in smoke form. The idea was to lull the mind gently into sleep without stimulating it. You hum along faintly, imagining the distant notes of Greensleeves echoing through the halls. In more spiritual circles, dream control became a preoccupation. There were guides on how to influence your dreams by meditating on a particular image, reciting a verse, or placing an object under your pillow. Some women tucked a small portrait of a loved one beneath their head, hoping it would guide their dreams toward romance or comfort. Others kept small dream diaries tucked into bedside drawers, writing down nighttime visions in the mornings with poetic flair. One particularly eccentric clergyman claimed that placing a piece of apple peel under his pillow allowed him to dream of the person he'd one day marry. We're not sure if it worked, but it's delightfully optimistic. Of course, some went a bit farther into the realm of superstition. There were amulets to ward off nightmares, including tiny sachets filled with sage, bay leaf, or wormwood. You might imagine yours now, stitched with your initials and smelling faintly of old gardens and forgotten spells. And then, there were those who believed in counting bells, imagining distant church bells tolling at regular intervals each chime, taking you one step closer to unconsciousness. It wasn't far off from the modern practice of counting sheep, except holier and with more Gothic architecture. When sleep still refused to come, a few Victorians took to writing letters they'd never send. These were rambling, emotional nighttime scribbles to departed family members, long-lost loves, or even God himself. The idea was to empty the heart before trying again. You can imagine the scratch of a quill, the candle flickering low, and someone murmuring aloud, "I don't know why I'm still awake, Mother, but the house feels heavier tonight." If that wasn't enough, you could always turn to bedtime affirmations, spoken phrases repeated quietly into the pillow, such as "My mind is still," or "The body is at peace." Sleep, it was believed, could be trained like a child, if only you repeated yourself calmly enough. Now, let's not forget the nocturnal accessories. Eye masks were rare, but not unheard of. Some ladies draped lace over their faces, if moonlight streamed through their windows. Earplugs, fashioned from beeswax and cloth, were occasionally used in city homes to muffle the sounds of carriages or drunken pub. And if all else failed, the family dog was sometimes invited onto the bed not as a guard, but as a living hot water bottle and emotional anchor. You reach down now and imagine the soft weight of a spaniel curled by your feet. His tail twitches. Once in a dream, and you smile. At this point, even the most stubborn Victorian insomniac would start to surrender. Wrapped in rituals, warmed by bricks and hope, guided by hymns and old herbs, they would at last feel the heaviness seep in first to the fingers, then the thoughts, then the breath. And you, centuries later, do the same. Your eyelids flutter. The imagined taste of warm milk still coats your tongue. The ticking clock is a metronome guiding you home. No sudden cure, just layers of fabric, of memory, of belief all pressing you toward sleep. You don't fight it, you simply allow it to arrive. Your breathing is slower now. The edges of your thoughts are feathered and soft, like the velvet trim on a Victorian curtain swaying gently in the night breeze. You've drifted through beds, baths, dreams, and herbal infusions, and now Before we fade out completely, we arrive at the most intimate layer of it all: the cultural meaning of sleep itself. Because for Victorians, sleep wasn't just a bodily function, it was a moral practice, a reflection of character, class, and even national pride. Let's start with the idea of discipline. A proper Victorian prided themselves on self-control and that extended into the bedroom. Rising too late was a sign of laziness or moral weakness. There were endless proverbs about early birds and worms and how God only favored the punctual. Early to bed and early to rise wasn't just a saying, it was a rule for life. You pull the quilt up to your chin, feeling slightly judged by that imaginary wall clock ticking sternly from its mantle. Children were trained young. Nursery schedules were rigorous, with fixed bedtimes, wake-up bells, and sometimes sleep charts posted on the wall. Nighttime was for rest, yes, but also for learning how to be a civilized adult. Sleeping too much, sloth, too little. Nervous disorder, just enough, and in the correct posture, with the correct number of blankets, and one's toes properly aligned with moral expectation. Perfect. Class distinctions showed up in sleeping habits too. The upper classes had multi-room suites, heated bricks, and layers of privacy. Servants often slept in cold, narrow quarters with only thin bedding and a bell rope hanging nearby ready to be summoned at any hour. Some slept in shifts, some, like footmen or nursemaids, slept lightly on purpose. Trained to wake at the first creak of a floorboard, it's said Queen Victoria herself slept in a modest bed, believing personal comfort should never outweigh humility. Though of course, she had a chambermaid or three to plump her pillows and draw her curtains. For the working classes, sleep was functional. It happened when it could after long shifts, amid noisy tenements with babies crying and boilers hissing. Yet, even among the poor, sleep had structure. It was scheduled around factory bells, church hours, or household chores. The idea that sleep should be earned, not merely taken, ran deep. Historians still debate whether this strict view of sleep improved health or simply introduced generations to chronic underrest masked as virtue. Interestingly, despite all this discipline, Victorians were deeply romantic about sleep. It was often written about in poetry and prose as a divine retreat, a moment of spiritual communion or emotional rebirth. Poet Christina Rossetti wrote of sleep as the stillness of a dreamless rest, where hearts lie low, and artists painted scenes of women reclining in twilight, faces serene, surrounded by drapery and candlelight. Sleep was purity. Sleep was femininity. Sleep was art. Even death was euphemistically called eternal sleep, and morning rituals included laying out the body in a peaceful sleep-like pose, hands folded, eyes gently closed. Pillows were fluffed, bedclothes straightened. A final bedtime from which one wouldn't wake. In this way, Victorians saw sleep as a practice that echoed across all stages of life, from the cradle to the grave. But even with all this weighty meaning, let's not forget that sleep was also full of charm and silliness. There were bedtime jokes. Children made faces at each other from behind bed curtains. Couples shared stories. Servants gossiped under quilts. Elderly aunties gave whispered advice like, never trust a man who sleeps without socks, or, if you dream of carrots, someone's lying to you. You can picture it, a grandmother tucking you in, nodding gravely as she tells you that snoring too loudly could attract fairies, or that the moon sometimes steals dreams to stitch into the stars. And so, we arrive at the final moments of your long meandering journey through Victorian sleep culture. The lettuce water has worked its spell. The music box has wound down. The cat has curled up on your feet. The house is quiet except for the steady whisper of time. Outside, the lamplighter is making his final round. The wind hums through the eaves. A clock chimes once, then falls silent. You're not just lying in bed anymore, you are part of a centuries-old tradition, one that involves herbs and brass bedframes, whispered prayers and dream diaries, cracked porcelain bowls and feather rituals, and here, in this peaceful replica of another age, you're exactly where you're meant to be. The room fades, the light softens, the mind lets go. Let it all fall away, now the ticking clocks, the lace curtains, the warm brick tucked at your feet. You've walked a slow, peculiar road tonight, through soft-lit bedrooms and herbal dreams, and every detail has brought you closer to rest. Breathe in deeply, let the lungs fill like bellows, then sigh the air back out, as if you were blowing out the last candle in a darkened room. You're safe here. There are no bells to ring, no drafts to chase, no chamber pots to trip over. Just the rhythm of breath, the weight of quiet, and the gentle hush of time turning its pages. Imagine your body, as part of the mattress, melting into it, stitched into the linens like a pressed flower. Even your thoughts are quieting those last, stubborn worries, unspooling like a ribbon, softer and slower until they dissolve entirely. The dream is already waiting. Maybe it's a walk through a garden. Maybe it's tea with a friend who no longer lives. Maybe it's something that doesn't make sense but still feels familiar. Like velvet underfoot or a lullaby you only half remember. Wherever it takes you, follow. Let it blur. Let it carry you beyond this voice and this hour. You've done enough today. And now, all that's left is sleep.